let me call Raghav on to join us. So Raghav is a teacher and is a founder of automationsstepbystep.com. He spent most of his time teaching the topics related to automation, testing, DevOps, CI, and he is also a coach, trainer, and conducts classes across the globe, like in US and India. So, and in this session, Raghav will be speaking on BDD, which is the behavior driven development. And you want to if you want to know more about Raghav, there's a link in our GTR on the GTR page on the speaker tab, so you can go and know more about him. So welcome Raghav, and I would like to give control to you, and you can take it forward from there. I'll just stop sharing my screen so that you can share your screen and take it forward from there.
Thanks a lot, Sujay, and just wanted to make sure you can hear me properly and see me.
Yes, it's pretty well.
Great. All right. So I believe you've given the controls to me. Let me try to share my screen. Let me know once you can see my screen.
Yes, we can see step by step what is BDD.
Great. So before I start there, welcome everyone to this session. I'm Raghav, and I believe most of you know about me, but just to give a short intro, I have been into testing and automation since last 12 years. I have taken a lot of automation projects as an automation test architect and as lead, and have handled several automation teams. And these days I spend most of my time teaching and training. So I do a lot of trainings and teachings, and these days travel is kind of stopped because of the situation of Corona and COVID. Otherwise, I travel a lot and teach. Today's session is about BDD, which is behavior driven development, and this is going to be a very much a kind of a basic session on BDD, where I will discuss, and we are going to learn what exactly is BDD, or why do we need it, what exactly is the process, how BDD was born, and the very basic things, because in a lot of organizations, a lot of people who believe BDD is kind of using some tools like Cucumber or JBehave. BDD is much more than that. So we are going to understand BDD is, how does the process starts in an organization. We can also understand when and why should we use or should we implement BDD in our projects. So with that, let me go to the slides. I hope you all can see it. Okay. Can I just get a yes if you're able to see the slide?
Yeah, we can see.
All right, so I'll start with what is BDD, and we'll also see what is Cucumber, and everything I'm going to start from scratch. So if you have no prior knowledge on what is BDD, do not worry. I'm going to start from the very basics, how BDD is done, the practices of BDD, and then finally we will see what is Cucumber. So this is the very first section. There are more sections, so this is the outline of the first section. So BDD is behavior driven development, that is the expanded form, and we need to understand what does it actually means and why should we do BDD. So in very simple words, BDD is all about collaboration between teams. So in a typical organization, we have business teams that take care of the user stories, the requirements, the business needs, and then there is a technical team who do the actual implementation of the requirements, and the dev testing teams all come as under the technical teams. And often it is seen that there is a gap in the communication between business teams and technical teams. Sometimes the user stories or the requirements are communicated, and then what we get as a final outcome is sometimes a little different than what we need, and we do not have a very good collaboration, and BDD is all about building a common understanding of the behavior of the application. So in practical, BDD, the process, generates a common documentation that can be understood by all the teams and all the stakeholders. So all of them have a kind of a single source of truth. If we look at BDD in an organization, so whenever we have to make any change in any application or a product, it can be a change in an existing feature, or it can be a addition of a completely new feature. We often create user story, which is kind of the story or kind of a requirement in terms of what the user needs. And here it is a kind of informal general explanation of the feature written from the perspective of the end user. So we have a user story, and then how does it start? There is a meeting where the user story is discussed among the teams. And then there is conversation and discussion on how should the system behave when we implement this feature, what are the examples, what are the scenarios, all this is discussed, and then some examples are created, discussed, and agreed upon by all the teams. Now later in the session I will show you how exactly this meeting happens, who are the people who attend these meetings, and what is the how do they discuss and what is the outcome. We will see a workshop, but at a very high level all these examples are discussed, and then the final examples that are approved or agreed upon, they are then documented, and then they are documented in a way that these examples, documented examples, can be used for development as well as for automation. And this is what we call as feature files when we talk about BDD. So the coding phase implements the behavior as per the documented examples, and we also use this for automation. So this is a kind of a very high level overview of how this process starts. And then we have three practices of BDD. It starts with discovery, formulation, and automation. So these are the basic three phases or the practices of BDD. When we talk about discovery, this is the phase where we discuss, the teams meet and discuss about the new feature, the stories, and we discuss some examples. So in this phase, the outcome is the agreed behavior of the system. So all the teams who participate in this meeting or in this discussion, they agree upon some examples and agree upon how the system should behave after we implement this change. Then we have the formulation phase, and here the agreed examples or the behavior that was an outcome of the discovery phase is taken forward, and this is then converted into written documentation. So concrete examples are created and documented. So we have a documented examples that can be used further in the automation phase, where we do automation as well as development as per these examples. So here these are as an input for automation, and then it drives the development of these features or these user stories. So the outcome of automation phase is the automation tests and the implemented code. So these are the three phases or three practices of BDD: discovery, formulation, and automation. And now we know a very high level view, and we know what is the basic process of BDD. So now with the documented examples, we have the team shared understanding is converted into documented examples, and then it guides the automation and development. We also call it as living documentation because now these documented examples are the single source of truth for every team. The business team refers it, the testing team refers this, and the development team also refers the same documentation. And in future, if there are any changes or any updates, this documentation will always be referred. So we call it as living documentation. Now, if we talk about Cucumber, Cucumber is a tool that facilitates BDD, and they can be other tools as well, like we have JBehave and then Behave. All these tools are there. Cucumber is kind of most popular for BDD, And here it provides us a platform that we can use to convert our documented examples into automation test cases. So we can use it for automation, and it is a tool that can understand the documentation that we create as part of the BDD process and can turn it into automation tests. So this was the very basics of what BDD is. Now let us look at a sample workshop or how BDD starts in an organization. Do you have any questions until now? Anything you want to discuss? So I believe we can move forward.
Yeah, Raghav, if there are any, we can go cover it at the end of 5 minutes.
Okay, sure.
Okay, we'll go through the slide.
Great. So let us see a sample discovery workshop. So we know we start with user stories, and whenever there needs to be any change in the application, a new feature addition or change in any existing feature, we create a user story. And we know user story is a informal or a general explanation of a software feature written from the perspective of end user. So what is a discovery workshop? Here in the discovery workshop, the business teams and the technical teams meet, discuss and collaborate on the new feature on the user stories. They discuss all the examples of how it can be implemented, what will be the outcome. They also discuss on examples around the scenario, what impact it will have, how will the other modules get impacted, and they can create some features or some kind of scenarios that can be agreed upon, and everyone agrees to all these examples. So there can be a lot of feedback during this meeting. So we have representatives from different teams and they can give their inputs, and then finally all these inputs are taken and the final examples are agreed upon. So let's see an example in action. Let's just say we have an application for booking flight tickets online. And now our next user story says that it needs to be worked on and implemented in the application, and the user story here we are going to discuss is when a user selects the flight and navigates to the payment process, keep the seats blocked until the process is completed or cancelled. So this is our user story, that whenever a user selects the flights and then proceeds for payment, the seats should be kept blocked until the process is completed or cancelled by the user. Now, in order to prepare this story, we have the discovery meeting where we have representatives from three teams, basically that is a business team, a testing team and a QA team meet and collaborate and discuss. And this is famously known as the Three Amigos meeting. So here representatives or people from three different teams meet, and it can be a product owner from the business team or a business analyst. They will be a representative from the dev team and a representative from the QA or the testing team. So here the process of discovery, or we can say the process of BDD, starts with this Three Amigos meeting. And here let us say the meeting starts, and it will start by the product owner or the business analyst will explain the user story, and he or she says, you see, for this functionality, we need to check and ensure that the seats are blocked until the process is completed or cancelled. Now the other people can give their inputs and feedback and can also discuss some examples. So here the dev team says, or the representative from dev team says, can you give some examples? Sure, the business use case is simple. John is using our application to book tickets from New York to Boston. He selects the flights and seats and moves to the payment process. Now the seats selected by John should be blocked and should not be shown as available until John completes the payment or cancels the process. Now here, the QA team says, or the tester says, should we keep a time limit for the transaction? That's a good point. There should be some limit on time to complete the transaction. And the dev says that will actually help us to implement the functionality better. The PO says, okay, I will have it added and documented. The tester again says, what about the scenario when user is in the process of booking and the flight gets cancelled or rescheduled due to any reason? The dev says, we can run an API at the backend before confirming the payment and booking. And the product owner says, great, now we have one more example to be documented. The dev again says, in case of payment processed and booking fails, we need to call the refund module. Yes, integration with the refund module will be important. And the PO says, I agree, did not think about this. And so on, they keep on discussing different examples, different scenarios, and they will agree upon the final examples that will then get documented in the next phase. So you see, this is how the meeting happens, and this is the all about collaboration between different teams so that we do not work in silos, and it is not that the testing team or the dev team just gets a user story and it is asked to just implement it and test it. We have collaboration right from the beginning, right from where we have got a requirement, and then we are discussing on all the possible examples, all the possible scenarios, and then finally the agreed examples will go forward. So here, the agreed system behavior is the outcome of this meeting. And this is how we complete the discovery phase of BDD. And then we will have a formulation phase where these examples will be formally documented, and finally automation where it will be converted into automation tests, and that will drive the coding and implementation of these features. So this was a very simple discovery workshop. Let us move on to the phase. The discovery common understanding was developed, and we got the agreed examples as the outcome of the discovery phase. Now in the formulation phase, these examples are then documented and formulated into business readable and executable scenarios. So let us see an example. So the example we are discussing is hold tickets until the transaction process is completed or cancelled. So here we will start by a feature, and we call the feature as ticket booking. And the scenario is hold tickets until a user completes the transaction process. Here I will say, given user is on ticket booking page, when user the tickets and proceeds for payment, then keep the tickets blocked until the user completes or cancels the transaction. So here you can see this is a very simple documentation, and the language we have used here is called Gherkin, and here we use these keywords given, when, and then. So this Gherkin language can be easily understood by some BDD tools like Cucumber. And here you can see given is like a precondition. I say given user is on the ticket booking page, action when user selects tickets, and is like some more of the previous type, like it is used with when. So it is some more action here. And then is the expected or the outcome. So we say then keep the tickets blocked until user completes or cancels the transaction. Now this user story, this feature, and this scenario is at a very, very high level. You can also add more examples, more features to drill down into the more technicalities of this scenario, but this is how we will create a documented example or a feature file in BDD, and this is business readable. Anybody who is non-technical, the business teams can easily read and understand this, and it is also executable. So the QA teams, the testing teams, the automation teams, and the development teams can use the same documentation for their automation and coding. And this is the purpose of BDD, that we have collaboration and we have a single document that is used by all the teams. So in the discovery phase, we saw there was three amigos meeting where we discussed the examples, user stories, and agreed on the system behavior. And in the formulation phase, we formulated the examples into business readable and executable scenarios using a specification language like Gherkin. And now we have got these documented and executable scenarios that we can take it forward. So we have covered discovery, formulation, and then in the automation phase, we will start using some tools like Cucumber, and we can give these formulated examples or documented examples as an input to this tool, and it can be used for automation and then can further be also be used by the dev team for code. So this was the formulation phase. Now, if we look at a workflow of BDD, a typical BDD process starts in an organization where the business owner or the owner of the application tells a product owner or the business analyst about his requirements. He will tell what changes he wants or what new features he wants, and then the BA or the product owner will talk to the dev and the testing teams or their representatives, and this is what we call as the three amigos meeting, where they will discuss about these requirements, the user stories, and what should be done, what are the examples, all the input and feedback is taken. So this is the step 2 where they will do this meeting and then agree, and this is the discovery phase, and these examples are then documented into phase. Finally, we have the automation and development phase that takes the outcome of the formulation phase, that is documented, and then do their automation and development. And finally, after this is done, we have the test execution phase where testing will be done. If there are bugs, they will be fixed, and retesting, regression will be done, and finally the features will be released. So this is a very typical BDD workflow. And if we talk about the agile process, like in sprint, in a sprint is a short time boxed period where the teams work to complete a set amount of work. So they can 2-week sprint where we take the work that can be completed within a duration of 2 weeks, and then everything from understanding the needs and everything is done in the sprint. And then there is a phase before the sprint where we actually do all this setup and finalize on the stories. So a BA or the product takes the requirement and he writes the user stories and examples, which are then discussed with the dev and QA team in the meeting. And then the selected examples are documented. And then as the sprint starts, so at this moment, at this point, it can be discussed and decided what examples or what user stories should go in. Based on the duration and based on the amount of work we have, it can be decided what all can we take in the sprint. And then as the sprint starts, we take these formulated and documented examples, and the automation team can start creating the automation test cases, the development team can start implementation, and then we have the test execution, validation, and finally release in the sprint. So this was a typical workflow of our BDD process. So I also have some quizzes. If you want, you can go on my website automationstepbystep.com and you will find some quizzes based on all these information and slides we have seen. Let us also now see a difference between the traditional process and the BDD process.
Raghav, just for a sorry to cut you. We just have last 5 minutes left. So maybe if you want to wrap up, maybe you can take it there. So we have one question also to be asked from our participants.
Yeah. So yeah. So I'm wrapping up in like 2 minutes.
Okay, cool.
So I just wanted to show, what's the exact difference between a traditional process and a BDD process. So, in case you want to go and implement BDD, what changes you should implement, because implementing BDD should be at the project level, should be at the organization level. It should not be that a testing team thinks that, okay, I want to do a BDD, so I will start using a Cucumber tool or some BDD tool and will start creating user stories. It happens today, but the actual use of BDD will be when it happens at a project level or an organization level. So if you see a traditional process, the business owner or the owner of the application meets the product owner or business analyst and tells about his requirements. The product owner or the business analyst documents these requirements and he will create some user stories, and then he will send these requirements to the dev team who will start their development and coding, and he will also send this to the testing team who will start creating test cases. And then finally, there will be a test execution phase, bug fixing, regression, retesting, and then finally release. Now here, if you see, in the traditional process, the dev and QA are not involved in the requirement discussion and user stories, and it is only the business teams or the product owner who works here, and then he will just hand over the finalized requirements to the dev and testing team. So, and the dev and testing team also work in silos, so there is no shared understanding between the dev and QA. If you talk about a BDD process, it again starts with when a business owner tells his requirements to the business analyst, and then as soon as he gets the requirement, the product owner will call the dev and testing team or their representatives, and they will do a meeting, which is the discovery phase. And here you can see the same documentation which is discussed and agreed upon by all the teams will be taken forward, and it will be used for automation development, and finally there will be the test execution and then finally release. And here if you see, there is a lot of communication, collaboration and sharing between all the teams. They have a common understanding and they also have a single source of truth, that is the documented examples that will be used by all the teams. So if you talk about a sprint, in the traditional process, the business analyst or PO writes the user stories and he commits the stories to the sprint. And then these stories are taken by dev team for development, testing team for creating test cases and automation, and then finally release. And then if you talk about a BDD process, once the PA or PO gets the requirement, he will write some stories and then call the representatives of QA and dev team and will do meeting and discuss, and then they will collaborate and finalize which will then get documented, and in the these examples will be taken forward, and then they will be development and automation, and then finally execution and release. So this is the difference between traditional process and the DD process. And now I hope you can understand what is the actual need of BDD, and then it should always start at a project or an organization level, because the real need and the real use of BDD is when all the teams collaborate. If a single team is using some BDD tool like Cucumber and maybe doing their testing or automation, it may not be a real BDD process, because it's all about collaboration between different disciplines and different teams. Okay, I'll stop, and you will get a lot of information about BDD, and just in case you do practicals and actually create a framework on BDD, you can also get that on my website, which is automationstepbystep.com. And if you scroll down, you will see a basics of BDD session, which has mostly this. And now we can take some questions.
Yeah, thanks, Raghav. Sorry to cut you in between because we already reached the time. So maybe I can, with the interest of time, I can just share my screen and take one question because we have another. Brijesh is already waiting. So let me share my screen.
Sujay, I think it's fine if Raghav can take a couple of questions.
Yes, that's what I will be taking a couple of questions. We have two questions for Raghav. So Raghav, if you can just read out on, you can see my screen.
Yes, Sujay, I can see your screen.
Sorry. So the first question is, can we use BDD with the APM for mobile testing?
Yeah, so the question is asked by Sarvesh. Yes, Sarvesh, we can use. In fact, see, BDD is a process. It does not matter whether you are using mobile testing, you are using APM, or you are using browser automation and using Selenium. You can use BDD anywhere. It is more of a process and more of a kind of a project need where we want that people should collaborate. We should have kind of a documented user stories, which will be a single source of truth. So you can use it with APM mobile testing as well. So it's nothing that it's stopping you from using BDD for any kind of project, but then it should be a kind of a decision of the team on the whole. It should not be a single team or a single section who wants to do BDD and use some tools. It should be at a project level and then at a organization level.
Okay. Another question, last question from Narayan Raj. He says, "I have." Maybe you can read it for yourself, so that you
Yeah.
can.
So Raj says, I have got one application which is already developed. Now need to test also. New development is also going on. In this case, how can we start and manage my testing? So Narayan Raj, I think I'm not sure if it is directly related to BDD, but then whatever you are using, for example, you may be using some particular type of testing or maybe some frameworks in case you're doing automation. When you say it is going into development, we're talking about the challenges that we face when our application is in development and we also have to do testing in parallel, then I can understand that you do not have a lot of clarity on what's going to be the final application or the scenarios or the actual how you will handle some. You do not have a hands-on experience, so in that case you may have some issues, but then you can go with the requirements, you can go with the user stories and with the product knowledge. So in this case, the product team, the BA team can help you. They can tell you that what should be going into your test cases or your test plan, how you should kind of design. And then one of the things you can is you can ask the dev team for the prototypes or the wireframe documents, which can also show you the actual or the sample screens, and based on that you can continue writing your test cases or do your testing. And of course, if you are talking about BDD, then BDD will work in the same way. It's just that you will be having the feature files, or you will be having these documented examples in Gherkin language, and then rest of the things you will do as you do normally in your testing.
Okay, thanks, Raghav. Guys, if you have further more questions, you can feel free to connect to Raghav anytime through LinkedIn. So once again, thanks, Raghav, for your speech. It was really insightful, and it was very calm and coolly you helped team how to guys how BDD works and all. So thanks once again.